Today's very special historical episode of Masters of the Universe on the Spector Creative channel is brought to you by boredom. Looking for something that's the total opposite of fun and enjoyment in life? Try boredom. When I sat down to start researching a video on Zoar, the eagle, falcon, bird character from Masters of the Universe, I knew going into it probably would be a pretty simplistic thing to do. I mean, it's a bird, it's a tool from the 70s that got reused in the 80s. Filmation turned it into the sorceress's alter ego, and game over, right? That's pretty much the story. Well, little was I to realize that Zor the Eagle, who has become one of the most iconic characters in Masters of the Universe, has a much more interesting story from both a toy, content, and, well, storyline history than one realizes. While most of us know Zor the Eagle as the alternate identity of the sorceress, the eagle bird version, well, the story doesn't even come close to starting and stopping there. So that's why we're jumping in. So I suppose it's best to start any toy documentary about a specific character with the origins of the tool, right? Where did the mold come from? I mean, we could start from the more well-known storyline and how He-Man goes hunting for orange birds to eat them for supper. No, I'm just kidding. He's rescuing Zor here. But we could also go and talk about how Zor entered the Masters of the Universe world in the 1983 line, but that's not even going to come close to doing the toy justice. So let's go back and talk a little bit about the creation of the line in its entirety, Masters of the Universe, that is. When it was created in 1982, one of the ways the line was expanded on was by adding characters that could reuse tools that already existed. Most people know Battle Cat and Panther came from what they assume is Big Jim on the Tiger Trail, which was one of the Big Jim hunting-themed sets that included a tiger and a cage, and it was found that this tiger was the perfect sort of size for He-Man to ride. So he was meant to be with a 12-inch figure. Well, that's not exactly true. While the Big Jim on the Tiger Trail included a tiger, the tool started off much earlier in the 70s as Tarzan's Panther, done in all black here. That was the origin of the tool, which then got reused in Big Jim and then reused in Masters of the Universe. Well, likewise, the Eagle tool, which this time did start in Big Jim, was the base for what eventually in 83 became Zoar and became Screech, the good and bad falcons, if you will. So this one's a little bit more clear-cut than the Tiger tool, which goes back farther than Big Jim, but it's interesting that there's actually more than one eagle in the Big Jim line. So let's get into that a little bit. So for eagle-eyed viewers, no pun intended, you will note that there are two different eagles that were released as part of the Big Jim line. There was the sort of bald eagle with the white head and the yellow beak, and then there was a more brown version that had brown feathers on the head and a white-gray beak. Same tool, they were actually released in the same year, 1974. The brown one was released as part of a set, which in the US was only available in a closed box. I'm showing the international so that you could see the eagle inside. This is the one with the brown head. In the US, it was called Danger at Eagle Peak. The Eagle of Danger Peak. There we go. Got it. So that was where the brown eagle came from. It was a closed box in the US, but it came with everything you see here. It came with the brown eagle, it came with pants, it came with a backpack and a shirt, and that's really what Big Jim was all about. It was kind of like a male Barbie line where he could be anyone. Then, that same year, the Eagle was re-released as a smaller pack, which was just called Big Jim's Eagle. And this is where the bald eagle version that has the white feathers and yellow beak, the one that's, I guess, more iconic. So, back on the Masters of the Universe side, 1982 was a huge year for the brand. It exceeded all sales forecasts. The glasses were selling like crazy, kids were drinking orange juice out of Skeletor and Man-at-Arms tumblers, and everybody was happy. Well, of course everyone was happy. And when sales are up, and you're looking to outsell Barbie and Hot Wheels, what are you going to do? You're going to expand the line, and that's what 1983 was all about. Most of the figures in the line were humanoid characters and reused basic parts with some new added areas, like Trapjaw got new legs and Man-E-Faces got the spinning mechanism for his head. Ram Man was a complete tool, but to flesh out the line, Mattel decided to dig deep into its tooling archive. It had already worked so well for the cats that these cats designed for a 12-inch line work really well for a 5-inch line. So, looking at what other tools were available, besides the gorilla that was going to be Gygor, the eagle could also be added to Masters of the Universe. So just like the scale wasn't quite right, well, He-Man being a 5-inch figure and the cat being designed for a 12-inch figure, well, same thing with the eagle. It just meant that the eagle was going to be giant. But why not? It's a fantasy world. It's a fantasy land. Why can't there be giant eagles in this world? So the name was also a reuse from a previous Mattel toy, and that was Zoar the Flying Eagle. Since Mattel already had the trademark to Zoar the Eagle, it made sense to just reuse it from the earlier 1970s toy for the Masters of the Universe figure. This is very, very commonplace in the toy industry, especially with Mattel. You'll see toys popping up all the time that reuse names from different lines. It's entirely to keep that name in use, so you don't have to repay for it, or rather get a free name and not have to pay for a new name. So that's why you'll see things like this. But with Zoar the Eagle working so well and sounding like a Masters of the Universe name, hey, complete with the two-part wings to body mechanism, that was how you got Zoar in the line with the name. It was already in use and available. Now, the idea of associating Zoar with one of the female characters, albeit Teela or the sorceress/goddess, well, that continues the story along a whole other path. Let's jump into that a little bit, but we'll probably have to split this up into two parts because there's a lot to cover. So when Zoar was originally released, Zoar was associated with Teela as the warrior goddess. Now, Teela was originally meant to be two different characters. One, the warrior, one, the goddess, whether or not she was wearing the armor. And this is why she was packed out with Zoar. Zoar was meant to be Teela's sort of eagle buddy that would listen to her commands. In fact, there were two different packouts. One where they're side to side, and another packout where they were facing off with each other, and Teela was wearing the snake armor, representing her as the goddess or sorceress, as opposed to without the armor, she was supposed to be Teela, the warrior. There's a whole video you can see on my series about this. Now, Zoar was also released as a single of just getting the eagle, although I definitely remember I got it with Teela. That's how I got my Teela as a kid. I remember I got it for my birthday party from a friend from school. Now, it's just as easy, of course, to do a bad guy version by dipping that same tool in a different bucket of paint. No, that's kidding. That's not actually how toys get painted. They don't get dropped into paint. They get carefully hand-painted. And so hence Screech was born. But unlike how Zoar was a partner with Teela, Screech was a direct partner with Skeletor, the head bad guy, and became Skeletor's sort of spy. Now, it's interesting to note, not only did they obviously share a color scheme in the purple and blue that made them match from a toy perspective and helped kids associate them, Zoar was supposed to be a bird, whereas Screech was originally designed to be an android, a robot bird. This is also made clear in the Mattel 1984 story guide. It was picked up by Filmation, but because the toy was a natural-looking bird, the mechanical parts were just assumed to be underneath or represented by the armor, although both Zoar and Screech did come with this armor. It's also interesting to note that Screech had some naming issues. You'll notice right on the front of package, he's actually called two different things, Screech with 2 E's and Screech with 3 E's, right on the same box. I guess they weren't really proofing their stuff, or maybe they hired me to do the proofing. Who knows? All right, so we've got an eagle tool. We've got two different characters now created from this eagle tool, but how did the eagle then go from being a buddy of Skeletor or buddy of Teela to the actual transformed animal version of the sorceress, to the point that the sorceress gave birth to Teela through an egg? Maybe, I guess? Well, weirder things have happened, but hey, it's a fantasy brand of action figures with characters like Snout Spout and Ram Man. What are you going to say? So, the adventure does continue. The use of the tool brought in to expand the 1983 line would eventually go on with Filmation to become one of the most definitive characters in the entire line, Zor the Falcon, one that's actually just as recognizable as Man-at-Arms, Battle-Cat, Skeletor, and Castle Grayskull to the casual fan. But the slow transition of He-Man's eagle buddy, or rather the falcon that would follow around Teela and obey her commands, or even the sorceress when she was called the goddess, to then becoming He-Man's bomb-dropping bird from the sky who would literally dive bomb against Skeletor, throwing missiles at him. Well, it's a very evolving story, shall we say, one that actually spans many, many years in many series of mini-comics, where eventually Zor would become the Sorceress's other form. So that's what we'll cover in Part 2, when Masters of the Universe went to the birds. The story only gets more fascinating from here, but Zor, the Sorceress, Teela, Screech, fascinating characters with a fascinating history that's worth remembering. I'll see you back here for Part 2, only on the Spector Creative channel. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos like it, well, there's a lot to check out on the channel if you've never explored, but let me know other topics you'd like to see me hit in the comments section. I'm always looking for great ideas, not just for Motu, but other toy brands to explore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.